Hey, hi friends, welcome to today's video. So in this video, I'm going to discuss about architecture of any iOS application. Okay, and while discussing that, we'll also discuss about that how we can architect our SwiftUI app, because nowadays we are discussing a lot about in terms of architecture. That is the architecture that we are using for UIKit application, that is still valid or still applicable for SwiftUI application or not. Now, before choosing any architecture, like in this video, I'm not going to tell you that whether you should use MVVM or Viper or any new designs pattern that are in the market these days floating. I'll tell you that how you can decide that which architecture you should choose, like what are the things that you should see while choosing any architecture. Now let's see the first part of this slide, that why the architecture is important. Now, when you develop any application, it's not like that you are going to develop everything pre-planned. It might happen that something changes while developing, or something may change after 6 months or 1 year of time. And also, it's not like that when you are writing the code, that code is just going to live for 6 months or 1 year. Like, I still remember my sentence. Remember one sentence from my previous manager that he used to tell that when you write a code, you write and thinking this point that how this code can live for next 7-8 years. So it's not that you are just solving the problem and just doing your work. You have to think in more broader perspective when you are developing or architecting a good application. So any architecture should have the flexibility to easily develop, change and introduce basically a new change. Like, it's not like that you developed for a particular module and then let's say that when a new module has to be integrated, you are going to modify a lot of code in your existing logic or existing code. That should not happen. It should be like that your app should be flexible enough to have more and more features into it. Think like stack views. Like, you can easily remove a child and easily add a child, and that the stack view adjusts automatically. The same thing should be with your app. Your app architecture should be good enough to add and remove a new feature. When we started iOS, we used to have MRC, people writing code. Then we migrated from that to ARC, and then XIBs came, storyboard came, then Swift came, and then now we have the SwiftUI. Now let's say that you developed some application 4 year back or 5 year back. Now that time, 5 year back, Objective-C was more popular, so you developed your application in Objective-C, and now the Swift came. Now when you started migrating your code from Objective-C to Swift, because we always try to have latest technology in our code. So let's say that if your code is not modular, you are putting everything just in one file or one class, it becomes very difficult to have that change. And many of time I have seen in many apps that people are writing the complete app in Swift, because in existing app that change is becoming too much difficult, or it's leading to so many problems. Now the same thing like when you're migrating from UIKit to SwiftUI. Let's say that if you are using some architecture where you are putting your view, your business logic, your view logic, your network call, everything in one file. For example, let's say I'm talking about MVC. Now if you have to migrate from a UIKit to SwiftUI, basically what you have to remove your view, or you have to remove your controller, because that will change when you migrate to SwiftUI. Now if let's say that you have written your all view logic, your all business logic, your network call inside controller, that means that you cannot simply just remove the controller, right? You have to bring those changes into some file and then link that new file to SwiftUI. So that becomes an extra overhead for you, and that I tell you that that's not a proper architecture, because your views should be completely separate from your data and domain layer. Like, when I'm changing the view, why my data and domain layer should change? It's just like the wrapper which is binding the view and your like your presentation layer and your domain layer, that thing should change. So that's the flexibility, and that's how you can decide that whether your architecture is good or bad. Okay. Now the second thing, as I was talking about, it should be easy to maintain. Like any new changes, we should be easily able to do without breaking any existing functionality. And the testing is also important. Like when you are writing the any new app, how much confident you are on your test cases. Now testing has a broad perspective. If I discuss, like testing is not just about the number that you see when you see the Xcode coverage. Okay, that I have 70%. Like many times I ask people that what's the test coverage. Like no, I have 78%, or I have 72%, I have 82%. And then again, my next question is that how much confident you are that no, if let's say that you develop some functionality and it goes to live, let's say without testing, can you do that? The answer is straightforward, no. So the testing should have a meaning. It's not like that you are just writing the test cases to cover the number of lines that has to be called. So when you are writing the test cases, you should also focus on that how you can test in terms of your actual logic. Now we have lot of things in the testing that we are going to discuss in the future videos. We have stubbing, we have mocking, we have integration test. So what things should actually go in the integration test, when you should actually make the API call, or in which scenario we can just take the local data. So all those things should come into the picture, and your architecture should be flexible enough to write the test cases. If you go 4 or 5 years back, people don't used to focus more on the testing or writing the test cases, but now if you see any good application, testing is one of the important thing that everyone is focusing nowadays. Then there should be also a scope for reusability. Like when you're writing some piece of code within the same organization, how that piece of code can be reused. Like instead of writing or directly dumping into the project, why can't I write as a package? Why can't I write as a separate project and then use that project as a sub module? There are a lot of things where you can use this reusability. You can write a reusable network manager, reusable logger. There are a lot of things where you can put this and then reuse it. It's not like that when you are developing that app, that time you will have your like every details clear that this particular things is going to be reused, or this particular things cannot be reused. You have to think that what we should write, or how we can write your project in more modular way, so that if in the future it is required, that particular feature can be easily plugged into that particular project. Okay. And then fast to integrate change, as I was discussing, that it should be easy enough to accommodate a new change. Not like that if someone asks you that you have to change something, let's say for example, I'll tell you in this case that let's say you are using a network manager called Alamo file, and now somebody asked you or there's some decision to remove Alamo file. Now that time you realize that you're using Alamo file at 100 of the places or 200 places in your code, for either URL session part or maybe some interdependence code that is finally inheriting or finally importing Alamo file. Now that time what will happen, that change to accommodate will take a lot of time, and it's not like that the time in the coding, that time will also go in testings, regression testing, lot of things will come to the picture. So again, in that's not the perfect architecture example, right? Like your code should be like whenever you are using such components, it should be very easy to like change. Let's say that if I have to change Alamo file to just normal URL session, the change should be maximum 1 or 2 files. Like why I should just import Alamo file everywhere? And the same thing goes for any third-party framework. And modularity, I was talking about that you have to make your project modular in terms of either writing a separate Swift package or separate Cocoa Pod library. Yeah, this also we just discussed, easy to remove and add a new framework. Okay, so these are the few reasons that why writing an application in a good architect is important. Okay, now the next topic is that how can we achieve a clean code with good architecture. Now there are few principles that basically these all depends on this on software architect principle. This is not related with iOS, okay, or not related with the mobile app development. Like you go to any field, these principles are common, like solid, dry, Yagni, kiss. So why these points are mandatory, that when you are choosing architecture, you have to see at that point of time that is your architecture following solid design principles. I've already made a separate video on solid principles, so you can just go and watch. I'll put that link in the description. The second thing is try, don't repeat yourself, and here the comes the your reusable part, that how much code you are actually reusing. And then you have Yagani, Kiss. So these principles are very important to decide in choosing architecture. So now if you talk about common use design pattern right now is MVVM, MVC, Viper, MVP and Redux. Okay, these are like, and out of these five, if you see MVVM is among the most popular. Like if you talk to someone, out of 10 maybe 7 to 8 projects will be on MVVM or design pattern, right? And the reason for MVVM being more popular is the simplicity, that the way it can be implemented, and it solves all the common problem that was having with the MVC, like the testability, reusability, modularity, scalability. All these problems can be easily tackled by MVVM. Then we have Viper. This is also a good design pattern where we have everything based out of protocol based. Some find it little difficult in the initial because of lot of files that it creates. We have MVP where we have presenter, and then we have Redux, which basically more used in the React Native or React.js project. But again, like in some of the iOS application, you will see this design pattern also implemented, and then each have its some pros, some cons, and based on what is suiting on your application, people choose among this design pattern, right? Now on top of that design patterns, we have some other thing like factory method, abstract factory, builder, singleton, adapter, decorator, facade, observer. These all patterns which we use in together with, like let's say that if I'm using MVVM, it's not like that I will be just using MVVM. I can still use singleton for some of the functionality. I can use builder or abstract for lot of other functionality. So this further makes your code more clean. Okay, so I'll suggest you that you can watch I have a series of video where I have discussed some of these design pattern in more detail. You can go to that link. I'll again provide that in the description. So together this and this we use to make a good architecture pattern for any iOS application. Okay, now let's talk about this new thing, and this is called MVPMN. Now what is N? This is not Nilesh. This I'm calling it as navigator. So MVVM N, that means MVVM navigator. Now what is this design pattern is basically that we have MVVM, you all know. So I'm just adding it N, and what is the responsibility of this N is just to add a navigator. Like for example, if you have a controller and you want to go from one controller to other controller, and you are creating the controller object in that view controller. So instead of doing that there, I'm creating it in some different file, calling it as a navigator, and then I'm using that navigator to navigate it. Okay, now let's see the code. So here if you see on the click of table view, okay, so this is normal. I have view model, everything. So this is MVVM, and then I have added one navigator. Now what is this doing? So instead of writing this navigation controller, push controller code everywhere, here I've created a separate class for this, and then here I'm creating basically this object, and I'm pushing it from this navigation controller instance that I'm passing. Okay, and I'm also passing storyboard and then the model that is required. Now if I tell you that what's the benefit of it, or why actually I made this new pattern. So one thing I can tell you, the benefit is that if I have to navigate to this controller from 10 places, then instead of writing this code at 10 places, I'm writing down it at just 1 places. it looks fantastic for this demo, right? Reusing like less code, but think in terms of that what and how it should be implemented in any real-time project, or actually it's going to help you or not. So in general scenario, when you write any application, in 90% of the cases you will realize that you are all navigating to a particular screen from a same screen. Like it's not like that. For example, if I have this detail view controller, I will be going from 10 places. In 90% of the cases, I'll go from only one place, like this place. Okay. For some of the files, you will find that you are actually navigating from or the same place from more than one instance. So for this demo video, actually this looks perfect, but if I talk in a real-time project, this doesn't make, or doesn't add so many values to my code. I'm just adding extra dependency of creating an extra file and adding the burden of writing the test cases for this extra file, and then gaining very few things out of it. Okay, so this might be look very fantastic. If I, let's say for example, if I have 100k subscriber in YouTube and I presented this new design pattern, it will become little popular, right? But at the end, I'm not adding any more value to my code just by adding extra file. Okay, so what my take from this actually name is that don't go with the name what you are seeing in the YouTube or what you are reading everywhere. When you're seeing a design pattern, try to see that how it's following your software design principles that we discussed few times back, and how it actually suits your project. And this architectural video from a demo project cannot be taken to a full scale or complex project all the time. For example, if you see all the examples of Apple on their site, they used to be an MVC, right? But we migrated from MVC to MVVM, Viper, Redux, all those new design patterns. Now the question was that time Apple was officially making all this app in the MVC design pattern, and then why we shifted because of the issue that MVC design pattern was having, right? And then we solved those issues in this new design pattern, that is MVVM, Viper, and the reason that MVVM became very much popular because it was further very easy, and as I told, it was solving all your testability, reusability, everything issues. Okay, so there are a lot of design pattern and we moved away from MVC, right? So don't go with this MVPMN name. I'm not recommending the design pattern. I'm just telling you that anybody can make any name, and it's up to you that you have to decide that which design pattern you choose based on your project complexity and then based on the software principles that it's following. Okay, now the questions remains the same, that what design pattern should you use for SwiftUI? Now see, I'm not recommending here any specific design pattern, but my answer here is that if you're using MVVM, go forward and use still MVVM. Like till now, if I didn't find any single issue of not using MVVM in SwiftUI. There are a lot of videos that you should not use MVVM in SwiftUI, but I watched some of them, but I didn't get the real answer that why you should not use it. They're just like that view is view model. I can tell one thing clearly, that in SwiftUI view is not view model. Now some of the examples you'll find on the YouTube and internet is that using core data in SwiftUI directly, because you can use core data wrapper property directly inside the SwiftUI, and then how this new design pattern like MV suits based on that, because you have your view and then you have core data wrapper which is actually acting like a view model. But think in terms of real-time example, like how many applications you will build that will just have the core data. Very rare or very few. You will always have core data with a network call. Now you cannot check your network call whether it is available, then read from view. If it is not available, then redirect to model or redirect to view model. Those things you cannot do in the view, right? You are breaking the principle of single responsibility there. Now how these things actually came from that, there was a question in Apple developer forum that we should move away from MVC to MV. Now again, that if if you were following MVC, then yeah, you should go with MV because you can relate something. But if you're already in a better architecture, like let's say for example MVVM, Viper or Redux, you should see that how you can implement the SwiftUI in the same instead of going through MB design pattern. Like if you see properly MB design pattern in any of video, you can easily see that how it's violating solid principles at multiple instances. Now, one of the common misuse what I see in this design pattern, like SwiftUI, basically people are injecting this services or all sort of dependency directly into the environment object at the root level. It looks perfect for a demo video. Let's say that if I have to show something that no, you follow this architecture, I'll take a simple screen with one or two screen, and I'll put the services everything into the my root layer. Now in sample video, generally you don't have this access token, refresh token, validity, expiry, all these things problem. So injecting a service at the root level looks pretty cool. But think of a scenario when you have a big complex screen with, for example, 20-30 services and maybe more other dependency like the logger, analytics, whole lot of things. Now what you will do in your case, that you will inject 50 dependency at the root level at the start of the project? Answer is no, right? And other thing is that you will not have the perfect data. Let's say that if your service need access token, you don't have access token at the starting of your app. That will come after the login or after some stage, right? What if the access token expire? You have to again change your environment object, right? So, and again, one of the thing is that when you set something in the environment object, it is, you can access it down the hierarchy. Now when we talk about the MVVM, we talk about a lot of dependency injection, that why we should inject a dependency that is actually required by that layer. Okay, we talk about abstractions. Now in this case, when you are injecting everything into the environment object, let's say that I injected 50 services and my home page just need one service, but ideally it is able to access all the rest 49 services, right? Because that's a part of environment object. So don't misuse environment object. I see a lot of people misusing environment object, misusing app storage for storing something like access token, refresh token. So don't misuse it. Think still in terms of your basic software principles, and I'm definitely sure that you will be able to come out with a better design pattern for SwiftUI. Now this slide actually is that there's a lot of design patterns right now in market. Somebody telling MV, view only, I view, and so on. Like I'm not against any of this design pattern, but I'm just telling you that you watch those videos and then relate with your basic software design principle, that is it violating. If it's violating, then come out with the flows, and if that is being properly handled in some other architecture, go with that architecture. Okay, there's nothing new in SwiftUI. You can still use your existing architecture that you are using with UI kit in SwiftUI also. Okay, now for this particular series that I'm going on, I'll be choosing MVVM. Now it's not like that I'm just favoring MVVM. It's just like that I find MVVM very simple to use, and it solves, as I was talking, that it solves all the issues. Okay, so that's all for today's video. Hope you have enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thank you.